Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking with me through that break. If you are just tuning in for the first time, you've missed a great show. We started it off with with the massive NFL news of the day, including Mike Evans signing that huge contract with the Bucks and Russell Wilson officially being designated for release. We talked a little bit about that. In our second segment, we went over the NFL proposed rule changes, specifically all about the kickoffs, onside kicks, and formations with that. In our last segment, we just went over the NBA with LeBron James breaking 40,000 points, Caitlin Clark versus Pete Maravich in the collegiate point scoring ranks. In this segment, we are going to talk about some of the big baseball news of the day. Aaron Nola signed a huge contract. How big of a contract? The biggest contract by average annual value (AAV). We'll talk about that in just a second, as well as Josh Donaldson's retirement and some huge and some rookies, or I guess prospects that have really stood out in spring training so far. But before we get into that, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcspodcast.net, leave a tip or donation. It'll pop up on our screen here, not just for you, but for everyone to see. We'll have a little conversation about that. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation. We appreciate anything you give, and we appreciate you guys sticking around and watching. But like I was saying, we are transitioning into baseball here, and the big news of the day in the MLB is Aaron Nola and his massive contract with the Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies and Aaron Nola came to terms on a 3-year, $129 million deal. Now, for those who are unaware how contract works in baseball, because there's different rules with contracts in different sports, baseball contracts are fully guaranteed. Every single one of them, fully guaranteed. So Aaron Nola gets $43 million a year for the next 3 years. That is a massive number. Not only that, that's the biggest number for a single year, the biggest AAV, average annual value, for a contract in MLB history. And you might look at me and say, didn't Shohei Ohtani sign a $700 million deal this offseason? And yes, he did. That might be the biggest contract ever. But by average annual value, he famously is only making $2 million a year here. So super backloaded on him. He's going to make like $690 million one season, which I can't imagine waking up and getting $690 million in my bank account. I don't know what I would do. But Aaron Nola is coming back to the Phillies. He's a little bit older, but the Phillies, who have made a couple deep playoff runs here back to back, he's a very important piece to that puzzle. That the top of that pitching staff, Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler, are the two-headed monster that has really pushed them through the playoffs as far as they've gotten these past 2 seasons. Obviously making it to the World Series 2 years ago and making it to the NLCS last year. Those two guys have really been the driving force, along with their batting, obviously, their home run hitters. Those two have really been the driving force, pushing this Philadelphia Phillies team to the through the postseason, not just to the postseason. They've been incredible. They are both getting huge contracts. I think the Phillies would have taken a massive step back if they weren't able to get this done with him. So getting that done, $43 million is a huge number a year. But for how important he is to that team, I'd say it's probably worth it. They only have this contending window for some time, for as long as they do, you know? And when you're in that window, you got to spend, especially when you're competing against teams like the Braves and like the Dodgers, Braves in your own division. It's tough in that NL. It really is. You have to have a super team. But outside of Aaron Nola and the Phillies making that huge contract, we had a retirement in the MLB. Josh Donaldson, third baseman who played for 7 teams in the MLB. He went around. He played for the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Twins, a couple other teams that I don't have off the top of my head. Josh Donaldson here, he won he's an MVP winner. 2015 he won the AL MVP. He's been to 3 All-Star games. He's won 2 Silver Sluggers. He's had a really incredible career. Now, Hall of Fame worthy, that's an interesting debate, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We'll talk about that when he enters the ballot in about 5 years. Josh Donaldson had a really incredible MLB career. Congratulations to him on hanging it up, and I hope he enjoys retirement here. Yeah. Other breaking news out of the MLB: Scott Boras, the client of the major pitchers and the 2 sluggers that took a long time to get signed. Scott Boras, he came out and he said that there is a pitching crisis. He said that 4 teams have reached out to him about 4 new teams, not just teams that they're having conversations with. 4 new teams have reached out and are having conversations about Blake Snell and Jordan Montgomery. And you have to take this with a grain of salt because he is their agent and he's trying to get them the most money with what limited leverage he has left. We've seen these money values of Cody Bellinger and of Matt Chapman both go down from what they were expected to sign for or what they were asking for at the beginning of free agency. You've seen a lot of that go down since then. So it's you can take that with a grain of salt. It's coming from the man himself. He might be trying to drive up competition, drive up that number. But it is really interesting that none of those guys have signed yet. We've talked ad nauseum about those 2 and how it's surprising that they haven't been signed, especially this late into spring training. We are like opening days in April. We're less than a month away from opening day. We are almost halfway through spring training at this point, and both of those guys don't have teams. It's a little bit concerning, and I'd expect them to sign in the next week, honestly. If they're not on a roster, because a lot of these rosters are getting solidified. You know, you never know what's going to happen with injuries, obviously. You knock on wood that that's not going to happen. But a lot of these rosters are starting to get solidified. A lot of these young guys are starting to solidify their spot in the roster. Some young guys like James Wood on the Nationals. He outfielder there. He's been getting power comparisons to some of the greatest power hitters in the league right now. Shohei Ohtani, Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton. He's been incredible. He's looked unstoppable in spring training. Now the Nationals are in a spot where he might not get called up. But then you have a guy like Cole Reagans, pitcher with the Royals. We talked a little bit about him when we did the Royals offseason breakdown a couple days ago. There are comparisons. He's being called the left-handed Jacob deGrom. And then Chase DeLauter, the outfielder from the Cleveland Guardians, out of James Madison University, he might be solidifying a spot for him in right field right now. There's a lot of people, a lot of teams that are making these big roster decisions, and these pitchers, I mean, there still is a month left, so there's still time, but it's getting to the point where it's more of a detriment to them to not be on a team than it is for them to be in free agency. So I'm curious what you guys think about that. I did promise there was some NHL breaking news, so before we get out of here, the New Jersey Devils have fired their head coach. This came just about 10 minutes ago while we were on break. But I wanted to get this out there that breaking news: the New Jersey Devils have fired their head coach. They expect Travis Green to be their interim head coach for the rest of the season. The Devils, who have had a really, honestly disappointing season. They came out of the gates last year. They were one of the best teams in the league. They won a playoff series, maybe two. Again, I don't remember. I don't have the bracket in front of me. I wasn't prepared to talk hockey right now. Um, but they've had a really disappointing season. Their defense and goaltending hasn't been the same. They've been a little injured this year, so that's not an excuse for them. But their team kind of just everyone took a big step backwards. Uh, the Devils were on the doorstep of being a contending team last year, and we thought they were close. We thought they might get there, but they just took a big step back. So keep an eye out on that. The trade deadline for the NHL is still around the corner. There's a lot going on in sports, so keep an eye out on those pitchers to be signed. Keep an eye out on spring training. The NFL offseason is about to pick up. We didn't even cover L'Jarius Sneed, who's been franchise tagged. But yeah, thank you everybody so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back tomorrow with another great show. You guys have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn.